her husband's funeral, Naomi's in-laws handed her a rusted, broken-down van as her inheritance, laughing as they threw her out of the house and stole the businesses she'd built with him. 7 months pregnant, with her 10-year-old son beside her, she had no choice but to live in the van they claimed was worthless. But one morning, as sunlight hit the peeling metal, Naomi saw something glimmer beneath the rust, a discovery that would turn her humiliation into the most unexpected victory of her life. Before we go any further, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end, and if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend. Now let's begin. The air was heavy with rain, though the sky hadn't broken yet. Naomi Carter stood at the edge of the open grave, one hand holding an umbrella, the other resting on the swell of her 7-month belly. Her son, Isaiah, barely 10, clung to her coat sleeve like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Around them, murmurs from a small crowd floated on the damp breeze. Such a shame, he was still young. Someone whispered, but you know his family. She won't last a month with him. Another replied, just low enough for Naomi to hear. Her in-laws stood across the grave, faces pale, eyes dry, dressed in black that looked like it had been tailored just for the occasion. Naomi's gaze lingered on them, not with hate, but with the quiet knowledge that they'd never accepted her. Not when she married their son, not when she helped him build the family business from a cramped back room into a downtown storefront, and certainly not now. By the time the last clod of dirt hit the coffin, Naomi's shoes were soaked through. She didn't have the energy to fight the cold creeping up her legs, but the will reading was next, and she clung to the thought that her husband had made sure she'd be protected for their children's sake. Inside the lawyer's office, the warmth of polished wood and the faint smell of old paper wrapped around her. She sat quietly, Isaiah beside her, as the lawyer opened the folder. His voice was steady, clinical, almost too formal for the words he read. To my wife, Naomi Carter, I leave our home at 42 Willow Lane. All my shares in Carter Floral and Design and the 1972 van. Naomi exhaled slowly. The house, the business, and yes, the old van. Her husband had been strangely sentimental about that thing. Relief softened her shoulders until her sister-in-law's laugh cut through the air. Oh no, that's not how it's going to work, the woman said, exchanging a look with her brother. Naomi blinked. Excuse me. Her father-in-law leaned forward, his tone clipped. The house and the business are family property. You married into it. You don't own it. The only thing you get is the van. And frankly, you're lucky we're letting you have that. The lawyer frowned, flipping through papers. That's not what's... Enough. The older man barked, his voice a thin thread of control. You want trouble, Naomi? Take us to court. Let's see how far you get while pregnant with no money. Naomi felt Isaiah's small hand tighten in hers. The room tilted just slightly, the smell of stale coffee mingling with her own rising nausea. She opened her mouth, then closed it. This wasn't the place. They were daring her to fight in their arena, and she'd already seen what they could do when cornered. 15 minutes later, she was standing outside with nothing but a set of van keys in her hand, and the faint sound of their laughter following her into the drizzle. On the walk to the van, parked behind the funeral hall, Isaiah kept glancing at her, as if hoping she'd say it was all a mistake. But Naomi stayed quiet, each step heavy with the knowledge that her life had just shifted into unfamiliar, dangerous territory. She ran her fingers over the van's side panel. Rust flaked off like brittle paper. It smelled of rain and old oil. This was her inheritance now, and for the first time all day, a strange thought settled in her chest. Fine, if this is the only thing they've left me, I'll make it enough. By the time Naomi reached the parking lot, the drizzle had turned to a fine mist that clung to her hair. The van was parked under a leaning lamppost, its paint bubbled and eaten away by rust. One of the back doors sagged like it had given up years ago. The driver's side mirror was held together with duct tape. She opened the door and was hit with a wave of stale air, oil, mildew, and the faint, metallic tang of time. Isaiah climbed in first, sliding across the cracked vinyl seat. His small fingers traced the splits in the material, as if reading some invisible map. Mom, we're not really living here, are we? His voice was quiet, almost hopeful. Naomi didn't answer right away. She set the keys in the cup holder, her hands lingering there, her eyes fixed on the dashboard. It was coated in dust, but she could still see fingerprints, her husband's, pressed into the grime from when he'd last tinkered with it. That night, they parked a van on the far side of an empty lot behind a closed hardware store. The hum of the streetlights above blended with the distant rush of traffic. Naomi wrapped Isaiah in a blanket and tucked it tight around him before lowering herself onto the narrow bench seat in the back. Her belly made it awkward, but she didn't care. At least here, they were out of the rain. A pair of shadows passed the van windows, voices muffled but clear enough. That's the Carter widow, right? Yeah, heard she lost everything. Her in-laws took it all. She was always too proud, never saw her begging. Guess she will now. Naomi stared at the ceiling, her jaw tightening. She could feel each baby kick like a reminder. You don't have time to break. The next morning, the chill woke her before the sun did. She dug for the small suitcase she'd managed to grab from the house, pulling out a sweater with worn cuffs. Isaiah was still asleep, curled up like he was bracing against the world. She kissed his forehead, then stepped outside into the gray dawn. She had no house, no shop, and no safety net, just a rusted van and the determination to make it work. And though she didn't know it yet, the van's value went far beyond its battered shell. Days blurred into a routine. Morning started with Naomi walking to the corner store for day-old bread, then returning to the van to split it between herself and Isaiah. She'd spend hours searching bulletin boards for any work she could do, cleaning, carrying, arranging flowers for a few coins. The van became their little island. Isaiah drew in the condensation on the windows, little stick figures holding hands. Naomi kept her hands busy, wiping surfaces, shifting boxes, trying to make the space less like a tomb and more like a home. It was during one of those cleanings that she noticed it. She was scrubbing a stubborn patch of rust near the back door when the sponge snagged on a sharp edge. Rust flaked off, revealing a tiny sliver of metal underneath, but it didn't look like the steel she expected. It was warmer in color, denser, almost glowing in the pale light. She frowned, running her thumb over it. The texture was smooth, almost too smooth. She pushed harder, peeling away more of the brittle surface. The sliver widened, catching the sunlight just right. And for a moment, it wasn't the color of any paint she'd ever seen. It was the color of wealth, of permanence. Gold. She blinked, stepping back, her heart pounding, not in wild excitement, but in a quiet, cautious rhythm. Her husband's voice echoed faintly in her mind. That van's our safety net. She'd always assumed it was just nostalgia talking. Naomi pressed her palm flat against the panel. It was heavy, far heavier than it had any right to be. The realization came slowly, like a sunrise. You didn't need to rush to know it would change everything. But she didn't shout. She didn't even smile. She simply picked up the sponge, wiped away the flakes from the floor, and whispered to herself, "Not yet." Because this wasn't just a find, it was a secret. And secrets were safest when kept close. Naomi didn't rush. Every day after, she worked like the gold wasn't there at all. Because the more invisible her discovery remained, the safer it was. She started small. One weekend, she quietly pried loose a narrow strip from the inside of the rear door, just enough to fit into her coat pocket. She sold it to a discreet jeweler across town, one who didn't ask questions. The money was more than she'd made in months. She used it to buy fresh clothes for Isaiah, prenatal vitamins, and enough food to fill their bellies without rationing. By the second sale, she'd saved enough to rent a tiny corner space in a quiet street market. It wasn't much, but with a few second-hand vases and flowers bought wholesale, Naomi began arranging bouquets. Her hands, once numb from cold nights in the van, remembered the skills she'd honed for years in the shop she'd built with her husband. People noticed. "Who's the new florist? She's got a real eye." One passerby whispered to another, "Isn't that Carter's widow?" came the reply. "I thought she was living in a van." The whispers didn't bother Naomi anymore. If anything, they fueled her. She arrived before sunrise, stayed past dark, and never spent more than she needed. Every extra coin was reinvested into better flowers, better tools, better displays. All the while, the van remained parked under the same leaning lamppost. She treated it like any old rust bucket, never letting on that its panels hid a fortune. Meanwhile, across town, her in-laws were choking on their own greed. The businesses they'd stolen began to crumble under their mismanagement. Orders went unfilled, bills piled up, and rumors of debt swirled. Naomi heard it all, sometimes from customers chatting in her shop. "Did you hear? Carter's family can't pay their suppliers." Figures. They never worked a day in their lives. She never joined in. She just smiled faintly, arranging lilies or roses, letting the scent of fresh blooms mask the quiet satisfaction building in her chest. Because Naomi knew gold wasn't the only thing that could grow quietly. So could power. By the time Naomi's daughter was born, the little street market stall had transformed into a sunlit corner shop with a green awning and a name painted in gold script, ISA and Rose, a nod to her two children. Inside, the air was rich with the scent of lilies, peonies, and eucalyptus. Customers came in not just for flowers, but for the way Naomi made them feel, seen, valued, welcomed. She remembered names, remembered anniversaries, and quietly slid a small sprig of baby's breath into every bouquet for luck. Her in-law's downfall was no longer a rumor. It was a headline. Carter Floral Chain declares bankruptcy. Carter family home listed for immediate sale. Naomi read the news without a smile, but deep inside, there was a calm sense of justice. The empire they'd stolen had crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. One afternoon, while she was wrapping a bouquet for a young bride, the shop door creaked open. Her father-in-law stepped inside, thinner than she remembered, his suit worn at the elbows. Behind him trailed her sister-in-law, who no longer carried herself with the same effortless superiority. "Naomi," he began, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "We've hit a rough patch. The house is gone. The business too. We need a place to stay, just until." Naomi kept her hands busy, tucking eucalyptus into the bouquet, the soft leaves brushing against her fingertips. She didn't look up until she tied the ribbon. "I remember," she said finally. "The day you told me the van was all I deserved, that my children and I deserved nothing good." She glanced at them then, not with anger, but with the same measured calm she'd used when deciding which flowers to trim and which to let bloom. Her sister-in-law's gaze darted to the shop's gold-lettered sign, then to the gold-plated pen Naomi used to write receipts. The realization flickered in her eyes. Naomi slid the finished bouquet across the counter to the waiting bride. "I'm afraid I don't have room," she said softly, but firmly. "Some things too small to hold the weight of the people who once tried to break them." They left without another word, a little bell on the door chiming like punctuation. Naomi exhaled slowly. It wasn't revenge she tasted, it was freedom. By the time Naomi's daughter was born, the little street market stall had transformed into a sunlit corner shop with a green awning and a name painted in gold script, Isa and Rose, a nod to her two children. Inside, the air was rich with the scent of lilies, peonies, and eucalyptus. Customers came in not just for flowers, but for the way Naomi made them feel, seen, valued, welcomed. She remembered names, remembered anniversaries, and quietly slid a small sprig of baby's breath into every bouquet for luck. Her in-law's downfall was no longer a rumor. It was a headline. Carter Floral Chain declares bankruptcy. Carter family home listed for immediate sale. Naomi read the news without a smile, but deep inside, there was a calm sense of justice. The empire they'd stolen had crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. One afternoon, while she was wrapping a bouquet for a young bride, the shop door creaked open. Her father-in-law stepped inside, thinner than she remembered, his suit worn at the elbows. Behind him trailed her sister-in-law, who no longer carried herself with the same effortless superiority. "Naomi," he began, voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "We've hit a rough patch. The house is gone. The business too. We need a place to stay, just until." Naomi kept her hands busy, tucking eucalyptus into the bouquet, the soft leaves brushing against her fingertips. She didn't look up until she tied the ribbon. "I remember," she said finally. "The day you told me the van was all I deserved, that my children and I deserved nothing good." She glanced at them then, not with anger, but with the same measured calm she'd used when deciding which flowers to trim and which to let bloom. Her sister-in-law's gaze darted to the shop's gold-lettered sign, then to the gold-plated pen Naomi used to write receipts. The realization flickered in her eyes. Naomi slid the finished bouquet across the counter to the waiting bride. "I'm afraid I don't have room," she said softly, but firmly. "Some things are too small to hold the weight of the people who once tried to break them." They left without another word, a little bell on the door chiming like punctuation. Naomi exhaled slowly. It wasn't revenge she tasted, it was freedom. Evening light spilled through the shop windows, bathing the petals in warm gold. Naomi sat at the counter, her newborn sleeping in a woven basket beside her, Isaiah sketching in a notebook across the way. She glanced at the van through the window. It still sat in the same parking space it had been in since that first night. Rusted, quiet, unassuming. No one passing by would guess that its battered shell had changed everything. The gold inside had given her a second chance, yes, but it wasn't the metal alone that built this life. It was the choice to keep moving, to work when it would have been easier to quit, to turn bitterness into something that could bloom. Sometimes she thought about her husband, how he must have known, how he'd left her the one thing they could never steal. She imagined him standing in the doorway, arms folded, that familiar, quiet pride in his eyes. Naomi brushed a stray petal from from the counter and looked around the shop, breathing in the sweet, green air. She didn't need the mansion, the stolen businesses, or even the family name. She had roots now, deep and steady, and they were hers alone. When customers asked about the old van, she'd smile and say, "It's just part of the story." Because the truth was gold could hide in the ugliest places, and the people who laugh at your worth often don't realize they've just handed you the key to your own freedom. If you found Naomi's journey as powerful as I did, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share the story with someone who needs a reminder that even in the rust and ruin, there can be gold. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in her shoes?